I've never been a fan of being told what to do, and if you can relate to that statement too, then I have a game for you. Here's my review of ICEY. The underlying story in ICEY sees you being tasked by a narrator to find and kill an entity known simply as Judas. I couldn't really tell you why you're tasked with doing such a thing though, as the story is very vague and mostly told through snippets of text that pop up throughout your adventure. That's pretty much it as far as the main premise goes. I wish it made more sense to me, but I guess it's okay that it doesn't, or whatever. And the reason I say that is because this plot revolving around Judas takes a back seat for the majority of the game in favor of a love-hate relationship between the narrator and you, the player. As you adventure through the fairly small world of ICEY, the narrator will proceed to explain what's going on screen. The kicker with this game, however, is that you don't have to listen to him. As a matter of fact, you can oftentimes go completely against his narration in favor of exploration, and that's where the uniqueness and most of the substance in ICEY lies. For example, what if you take a left when you're told to make a right? Will you end up in a level that was unfinished, was meant to be scrapped, but still ended up in the game? Or will you defy the rules to such an extent that the narrator completely changes the game you're playing? There are a lot of secret areas and hidden bits of dialogue to find throughout ICEY's roughly 2 to 3 hour runtime, and you're going to have to find them all if you want to unlock what I guess would be considered the end of the game. ICEY is fairly short and generic when it comes to its overarching plot, but it does a great job of being unique and pushing the player to defy the rules and annoy a narrator just trying to do his pre-programmed job. Visually, ICEY is a pretty damn good looking 2D side-scrolling beat-em-up. It has the look and appeal of a modern day arcade game that's melded its graphical poppiness with the somewhat lazy, cheap aesthetic of an internet flash game. It's an odd visual style, and while the varying color palettes and bright, heavily stylized attack animations have a tendency to really grab your attention, I still felt it all looked kind of cheap. However, the game runs pretty damn well, and I had no issues with choppiness or crashes, so expect a smooth, silky 60 FPS. Now musically, ICEY is absolutely kick-ass. The soundtrack here is a medley of early 2000s EDM samples, chopped and shuffled Dance Dance Revolution songs, and select tracks from Now That's What I Call Music to Do Cocaine To, Volume 8. From the get-go, ICEY's soundtrack starts bumping hard, and doesn't let up until the moment the credits roll. Each track is a rapid fire of synthetic notes riding alongside booming bass drums and hard-hitting snares. Arpeggiation and high-pitched notes are commonplace here and are highly welcome. I loved everything about the soundtrack in ICEY, and I'd even go so far as to say it's one of my favorite things about the game. Something I didn't love so much, however, was the narrator's voice.
How could he smear my name like this?
He's basically the only one who speaks in this game, and since he's the one explaining your every move, you can pretty much guarantee that he's going to be talking a lot. Spoken narration is something I'm okay with 99.984525% of the time, but here, no. Just no. I can't pinpoint it, but something about the narrator's voice just irritated me to no end. I'm not sure if it's his insufferable whininess or his, in my opinion, half-assed, uninspired performance, but something about him made me want to load my body into a cannon and shoot myself into the ocean in an attempt to get as far away as possible from it. All in all, ICEY is rocking a presentation that I'd summarize as so-so. There's some good here, as well as some bad, but there's also just enough of each to cancel one another out, leaving me with no choice but to give this category a rating of meh. Gameplay-wise, ICEY is a fairly competent action beat-em-up. The gameplay here walks a fine line between smashing robots to a pulp while racking up the highest combo score you can, and exploring while deliberately going against everything the narrator says. The fighting sections of ICEY actually control very well, and are a blast to take part in. The combat here is a hot and spicy mix of light and heavy attacks, along with well-timed dodges and special execution moves. It may take a little bit of time to get adjusted to the combat here, but once it clicks, it's surprisingly responsive. Weaving different combo attacks and perfectly timed dodges into parry attacks is immensely satisfying, and is further built on with purchasable upgrades. Defeating enemies and exploring secret areas oftentimes rewards you with gold, which you can use to upgrade your health and the damage done by specific attacks. The combat and upgrade systems found in this game aren't overly complicated, or time-consuming either, which I thought was a nice touch, and getting these upgrades and learning the combat system is paramount for survival, especially once you encounter some of the game's later bosses. Yep, bosses. This game has bosses. Boss fights! Who doesn't like big baddies? While mowing down trash mobs can be fun and satisfying when you pull off a quote-unquote sick combo, bro, the real fun lies in the many boss battles waiting for your attention here. Each one is dramatically different and more difficult than the last, and I had a ridiculous amount of fun finding and overcoming these challenging encounters. Outside of the combat, you'll be spending your time exploring and purposefully going against the words of the narrator. Even though I found the disembodied voice following me everywhere to be insufferable, I still enjoyed looking looking for all the ways I could annoy him, and all the secret areas it could lead to. This part of ICEY's gameplay reminded me heavily of the Stanley Parable, another indie title about going against the word of a narrator who thinks they know everything. There's a decent amount of secret areas and hidden bits of dialogue here for you to find, and like I mentioned before, you'll have to find them all if you want to see ICEY's true ending. Altogether, the gameplay here is more good than bad. There were a few times where I was hit by an attack I felt I dodged, and there seemed to be an odd bug where I had to repeatedly mash the action button to open the upgrade store. But other than that, the game controlled without a hitch, which, admittedly, came as a surprise to me. ICEY is a game with big ideas in a not-so-big game world. The subject matter it tackles can be a bit controversial, and the story that these subjects are found in can be a bit too obscure to follow, but a decent bit of that can be forgiven in exchange for a fairly unique mechanic involving player choice, responsive and easy-to-get-down combat controls, and an absolutely killer soundtrack. Unfortunately, however, I can't say that these positives are enough to warrant giving this title a verdict of definitely worth full price. So instead, I'll be a nice boyo and go ahead and give ICEY a verdict of definitely worth sale price. So that was my 2 cents on ICEY. I hope you enjoyed the review. If you did, be sure to smash them there subscribe and like buttons, as it really helps out the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.